Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Today is May 27th, 2024, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? And before I begin, I just want to let you know, guys, that I am finally done with my repairs and renovations on my property. If some of you may have seen my post last week, I was doing some big repairs in the last few weeks, and that took a lot of my time, and I just physically wasn't able to make as many videos as I would like. But thankfully, I'm done, and I will be making more regular updates. So thank you for your patience, and let's get to the news that happened in the last few days, shall we? So, first update I want to give you guys, and this is really still in development. The Ukrainians struck the Luhansk airport, from what it seems, based on the pictures, just right now. So we know that Luhansk is obviously the capital of the Oblast of Luhansk. And the airport is located kind of south of the city, right around here. And some locals reported that they saw big fires and explosions. And of course, the only weapon that could reach so far are ATACMS. So the Ukrainians utilized the American ballistics to strike the airport. Most likely, perhaps air defense systems, and maybe jet fighters that were present. I don't know, command posts. But this is still in development. So this is really another great strike. And the Ukrainians, again, have that capacity to strike really deep within Russian-occupied territory in Ukraine. So this is great news, and we'll have some images most likely next few days of the aftermath of this strike. And I hope that there were some jet fighters also destroyed in the process. But you know that if the Ukrainians use ATACMS, it's not just for some, for targets that are not worth it, right? This is really juicy targets, extremely expensive air defense systems or command posts. The Ukrainians are not wasting these missiles for nothing. So that's one update. Additionally, of course, I want to go to Kharkiv because a lot of the focus is on Kharkiv now, but it's been over 2 weeks since the Russians started this offensive, and what we can say is that so far, well, they haven't made any gains since their, the first 2-3 days where they had some sort of a breakthrough, a partial breakthrough, but now it's been completely stopped. It's been confirmed by the Ukrainian armed forces they have stabilized the situation around Vovchansk and also, the northern sector of Kharkiv city, where the Russians opened another front. So far, that's pretty much the Russian gains in the last 2 weeks, and I don't really anticipate them consolidating more gains in the future. And there's more reports indicating that the Russians, that's pretty much the culmination of their Kharkiv offensive. But that won't stop them from trying, and there's more rumors, which we've been talking about the last few weeks, of the Russians attempting another front, so opening another front in Sumy. Perhaps it could be towards Sumy city, which obviously would be difficult because it's pretty far away from the front line. But again, the Russians, I think, as it's been mentioned in the past, are trying to stretch Ukraine defenses. It's not like the Russians can open multiple fronts, but I think that they still might have enough troops to open another one in Sumy. And again, I think part of it is not just about stretching Ukraine defenses, but it's also a message from Putin, who's desperately trying to showcase to his population that he can still conduct this special military operation. And for the Russians, for them, they don't really make a distinction between capturing a village of 500 people, let's say, and a city of 30,000 people and plus. So for them, it's like Berlin 1945. And as long as they see Russian flags waving over Ukrainian settlements, that's all that matters for them. So I think that there's also, a propaganda aspect to it, where Putin is trying to display that he still has this special military operation under control, and also a message to the world that, look at me, I can still continue attacking Ukraine, and we can still do open new fronts if necessary. But we know that this is not as easy as it seems for the Russians, and they took months to plan this operation, and I certainly don't think that this was the outcome that the Russians were expecting. They hoped really to have a breakthrough, at least within the outskirts of Kharkiv, and there is more news articles that came out the last few days that are confirming that the Russians were hoping to really get really close to Kharkiv city and start shelling it to destroy it completely, right? If you can have it, then if I can have it, then you can either, right? Type of mentality that the Russians have. And unfortunately, as we've seen this weekend, the Russians yet again did another terrorist attack in Kharkiv and attacked a shopping mall, injuring and killing several civilians, and this is exactly their game plan, right? If I can have it, you can have it either. So, but all that being said, the Russians certainly have not gained any success in this front, right? Having about 5 to 10 kilometers of a buffer zone isn't a win in my eyes for the world's second largest army. And as we can see as well, the Ukrainians, there's more rumors that they're about to counterattack in this sector, specifically in Vovchansk. And the Russians simply don't have enough forces to be able to really defend themselves. And we know that the F-16s are coming soon. We know that the Ukrainians also have ATACMS, and we're just waiting, which I'll get into a little bit later. We're waiting for the United States to give the green light, which I think will happen. It's just a matter of time to allow the Ukrainians to strike Russian soil with their weapons. And we know that the most important one is the ATACMS, the ballistics, that have a super long range and have shown their effectiveness in destroying Russian military assets. So we'll see how that develops, but so far I can tell you that the situation is stable. Yes, it's unfortunate the Russians do control a small area, but that's part of the war, right? It's not like it's going to be happening right at the border between Russia and Ukraine. Certain things could have been done better by the Ukrainians, specifically mining the borders. But again, things are not perfect, and it's good at least to see that the Ukrainians were able to stabilize the situation about 5 to 10 kilometers max, from the Russian border. So overall, this is good. And apart from that, I can't really, there's not that many other updates to give you guys. The Russians continue pushing around Chasiv Yar. So far, no real gains were made by the Russians. They continue really, you can see the 3 kind of pushes they're doing a little bit more north of Chasiv Yar towards Klishchiivka, one in the center, this main road that leads into Chasiv Yar, and then another one more south through kind of this forested area. So they're trying to storm in 3 different directions. And based on the videos that I've seen even today, there was one that was shared of another armored column, Russian armored column, heading straight towards Chasiv Yar. They were now utilizing T-90s, the most modern tanks that the Russians have. And they were also destroyed through artillery and also FPV drones and also mines. So it doesn't seem like the Russians will have any success, at least in the short term, in taking Chasiv Yar. And I think that there is an air of confidence that the Ukrainians now have enough weapons to not only defend Chasiv Yar, but also start pushing the Russians out of the city of Chasiv Yar. We'll see. But so far, really based on the fact that the Ukrainians have received a lot of ammunition, a lot of shells, a lot of air defenses. Again, in this sector, I think the past week, the Ukrainians have claimed to shut down about 4 to 5 Su-25s. So this is a big development because this means that the Ukrainians certainly do have the Stingers or other manpads available to strike and destroy Russian jet fighters, which just a few months ago were flying freely, fully knowing that the Ukrainians did not have air defense systems present here, which allowed them to start dumping glide bombs at will. And now that's not the case anymore. They're losing more and more of their Su-25s and other jet fighters. So overall, I think the situation is also very stable in Chasiv Yar, and we'll see how that develops. Additionally, in Avdiivka, you can see that, again, no gains were made by the Russians in the last week. They continue trying to push. They're trying to find an area where they can penetrate and have a partial breakthrough, but the Ukrainians, seem to have stabilized the situation around the outskirts of Avdiivka. But the battles here are still very fierce, very strong, and the Russians, as you can see, they have moved so many troops, so many reserves, that it's very difficult to be able to really defend this area, especially because it's all mostly open fields. There's no real forested area, and it's mainly just battles are ongoing by these settlements. There's a small positive development, again, nothing game-changing, but you can see the Ukrainians managed to kind of gain back some territory around the area of Novelsk, which is right beside Peske. So this is, I guess, a positive development, but again, we're only talking about a small field here. Most likely you can see a Posadka, which was taken back by the Ukrainians. So that's good. Furthermore, you can see that there's a slight Russian gain in Krasnohorivka. They've pushed more laterally on the western side of the city, and you can see that they're continuing their pushes around Krasnohorivka. They've kind of claimed the center of the city, but both the north and the southern sectors are still slightly under Ukraine control. So again, this is less desirable for the Ukrainians, but they continue holding parts of the city of Krasnohorivka. And last but not least, there's some talks of the Russians around the area of actually Orozhaine. They're preparing a big offensive, according to the Ukraine military. They're trying to claim back some of the villages that were gained by the Ukrainians last summer around the area of Orozhaine. So we'll see how that develops, as the Russians seem to be accumulating a lot of troops and reserves here for most likely an attack in the next few weeks. But apart from that, that's pretty much it. One front that I don't really often talk about is Kherson. And here, apparently, the Ukrainians moved their bridgehead from Krinky to Kozachie Lageri. So the Ukrainians are no longer present in Krinky. They've moved more, I guess, west of Krinky towards Kozachie Lageri. Again, this is I think it's more of an area where the Ukrainians want to draw as many Russian resources as possible. I don't see the Ukrainians having any gains here in the nearby future. But it's just to distract the Russians, right? Making the Russians know that the Ukrainians are very capable of crossing the Dnieper River, and they're able to take certain settlements, and also, be aggressive in this sector. We know that one of the reasons why the Ukrainians are able to hold parts of the left bank is because of the FPV drones that they're flying regularly in this sector. They're striking Russian troops, Russian armored columns, and other command centers. So the Ukrainians are really raining terror over Russian troops here in the left bank of Kherson. So overall, the situation, what I can tell you again, is very stable. The Ukrainians, thanks to Western help, are able to continue holding the Russian attacks in Donbass. And there's a sense of the Ukrainians being able to now perhaps start mounting a future offensive in the next few months. Most likely will be in 2025, but overall things are positive for Ukraine so far. Now let's get to the news, because there's a few things I want to discuss as well. So let's get to it. First of all, a big development, and I think this is really major, because we all have been hearing Russia's threats, nuclear threats, in the last 2.5 years. Of, if you do this, we're going to strike Europe with nuclear weapons. And you can see that Ukraine is calling out this bluff that Russia's doing by destroying or damaging Russia's nuclear deterrence systems. So today it's been confirmed that the Ukrainian military intelligence attacked the early warning Voronezh M radar in Orsk city in Orenburg. And if you guys remember, a few months ago, they had massive floods, huge issues out there. And it's very far away from Ukraine. As a matter of fact, Orsk is about 1,800 kilometers away from Ukraine, so close to 2,000 kilometers. And the Ukrainians use long-range drones, again, the damage of this radar system is unknown. We don't have any confirmation. But if that is the case, it's still a major development. The Ukrainians now have drones that can reach over close to 2,000 kilometers. This is massive. And we've talked about it. I think that the Ukrainians have been making announcements this year that they've been able to develop and produce drones that have over close to 3,000 kilometers of range, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong here, but again, you can see that 2,000 kilometers is massive. And again, has Russia responded with nuclear strikes in Ukraine following this? Because this is a big deal. This is the nuclear deterrence systems that Russia has, that Ukraine has supposedly been able to damage or even strike. The extent of the damage is unknown, but at least they were able to fly into it or very close to it. And, another very important thing, which is, I guess, a good development, is that the United States has warned Russia that if they utilize nuclear weapons in Ukraine, that they will destroy all of their bases and staging areas in Ukraine. So this is a very big message. But the biggest one, of course, and I've talked about it in my last video, is that the Biden administration has to explicitly say that Ukraine can use American weapons on Russian soil for legitimate military targets. And I believe it's just a matter of time. There's too much pressure, and I think that the Biden administration will do that. But so far, this is really a limiting factor for Ukraine's success. And we absolutely need to see the United States to step up, because they're a global leader, and they absolutely need to say that Ukraine has the right to strike Russia with our weapons, because this will really help the Ukrainians change the tide. Imagine with the F-16s and all the different nomenclature of bombs and missiles, and also with the ATACMS, what the Ukrainians could do in Russia and all the military targets that exist there, right? If that was to happen, if that decision was made 2 years ago, this would have been game changing, in my opinion, at this point. I don't think Russia would be able to continue attacking Ukraine if Ukraine was allowed to strike Russia with all the long range weapons that the United States and Europe had. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. That's the past, but hopefully the right decisions will be made in the next few weeks because Ukraine absolutely needs that to happen. So let's go to the next news. And speaking of European countries or Western countries allowing Ukraine to use their weapons to strike Russia, we have one of the very first countries, Sweden, which now confirms that Ukraine can use their weapon systems on Russian soil. So huge thank you for Sweden. This is, again, a big move. And I believe that the first one was the United Kingdom, if I remember correctly. I'm not 100% sure if the UK was very explicit, but I remember talking about it with you guys that Britain and David Cameron seemed to say that Ukraine could use British weapons on Russian soil. So now we have Sweden as well that joins the party. And we know that Sweden right now has provided Ukraine with the Archer artillery systems. And their range, if they go with the right shells, can go as far as 50 kilometers. And we know that they're very precise, they fire very quickly, and they can also move very quickly. So this could be very important for Kharkiv and Sumy. And the Ukrainians could station some of these Archer artillery systems not that far away from the border. Let's say, you obviously need a buffer zone of about 20 kilometers to strike Belgorod or Kursk or other oblasts, Russian oblasts. They're very close to the Ukraine border, or they're staging areas, Russian staging areas. So this is a very, very good announcement by Sweden. A huge thank you, because this is a very big, decisive decision by Sweden, right? So I hope that more countries will join. And I think I heard Italy as well claim the same thing, that Ukraine should have the right to strike Russian targets in Russia. So we can have a sense, there's a sense that now Europe is waking up, finally understanding that you need to give a fighting chance to Ukraine. And we know as well, I think part of it was a fear that Ukraine will just answer back symmetrically by attacking Russian civilian targets or infrastructure. That hasn't happened. The Ukrainians, as we have seen the last almost 2.5 years, have been striking only legitimate targets, that is military targets, and they've been fighting very responsibly. So I think Ukraine has proven itself to be, a follower of human rights, of the Geneva War Conventions, and, Europe should trust Ukraine in doing what's best for Ukraine. And last but not least, a big announcement from Spain. Zelensky went to Spain today to sign a big deal with Spain, and Spain committed to give 1 billion euros worth of military aid to Ukraine. You can see that they will send some anti-aircraft missiles, the Patriots missiles, and some about 20 second-hand made Leopard 2A4s. So this is the more modern Leopard 2 iteration, but not the most modern one. So this is a very big step up from Spain. So huge thank you to the Spanish people and the government for continuously assisting Ukraine. We know that this is not the first time that Spain sent out some military aid to Ukraine. So thank you again. And I think that overall, Europe starts understanding more and more that investing in Ukraine is also investing not just for, assuring Ukraine's success, but long-term European security. Russia has really explicitly voiced its ambitions, which do not stop just Ukraine. They go in the Baltics, they'll go in Poland, they'll go in Moldova if they have to, because they're sick on imperialism. The Russian society simply believes that being great is about conquering others through violence and aggression. So I think that Europe starts understanding their mentality, their philosophy, and we'll see more countries in the near future surely continue sending military and financial aid to Ukraine. And again, this is all thanks to Ukraine's resilience and courage in almost 2.5 years. We have seen their bravery and their courage, and Ukraine shows that they will continue fighting until the very end. And without that, I don't think any of the European countries or the United States would continue supporting Ukraine if they saw that Ukraine was a lost cause, and they see that Ukraine isn't. And the Ukrainians, no matter what happens, will continue fighting because they're fighting for their right to live and be independent. So With that, I will just leave you some other good news. That France as well is considering, and most likely will send instructors as well to train Ukrainian troops. There's no dates given, there's no timeline, but I think that that's going to happen. So again, all that being said, you see that there's a very positive trend, specifically from Europe and the European countries, that they understand how important Ukraine's victory is, and so they need to help and do everything that they can to help Ukraine. So that's the video for today, guys. A huge thank you for support. Again, if you enjoy my content, please subscribe to my channel, leave me a comment about any of the topics that I covered today. And again, a huge thank you for support, not only for this channel, but for Ukraine. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini!